I agree. Nick Namalita, this is my channel, The Midnight Librarian, and today I will be talking about my October wrap-up. So I don't think I really filmed anything aside from my September wrap-up in the month of October. I ended up taking a bit of a break. I just did not have the energy to film, let alone edit. So I know I still have to post my September wrap-up, and hopefully by now you have seen my November TBR. Let's talk about what I read for the month of October. It felt like I was getting into a bit of a slump. I think I did okay. I participated in Spookoplathon, which was a spooky readathon based off of Becca and the Books TBR game, Bookopoly, which is Monopoly but make it bookish. So I'll have my TBR as well as Becca's channel linked down in the description down below if you want to go check that out. I didn't do too bad. Didn't do too bad. Let's talk about how many books I read. Okay, so I ended up reading 8 books for the month of October, which equates to 2,266 pages and 64.7 hours listened to. I have heavily relied on audiobooks. We have 7 audiobooks and 1 physical. And then for formats, all of them are novels. For audience, we have 6 adults, 1 children's, and 1 middle grade. And then for genres, I have 1 classic, 1 historical, 2 mystery, 3 nonfiction, and 1 thriller. And then for my rating breakdown, I have 0 1 stars, 0 1 stars, 1 2 star, 1 3 star, 3 3.5 star, and 3 4 stars, and 0 5 stars, which gives the month of October the average rating of 3.44. I did have 2 DNFs. My first, let me find it. The first is My Roommate is a Vampire by Jenna Levine. This was new release that I was kind of excited for. It was like a contemporary romantasy. We were following Cassie Greenberg, who's an artist, a struggling artist in Chicago, and ends up about to be kicked out of her apartment when she finds a deal that's too good to be true, with basically finding a room for rent with a odd person. Frederick J. Fitzwilliam is far from normal, sleeps all day, is out all night for business, and talks like he walked out of a Regency romance novel, but he leaves Cassie some heart-melting notes and yada yada. Anyway, I did not like this. I was trying to listen to it and ultimately found that the whole book came off as judgy as all hell. It bothered me that Cassie immediately was like, what the hell kind of name is Frederick Fitzwilliam? It bugged me that Frederick immediately based Cassie's gender off her name. And I ultimately just didn't like Cassie at all. I thought that she was very much judgy. I don't think she treated her friends well, and I just really didn't care for her. I got to about 30% of the book and was like, I really just don't care where this goes. Especially because it felt very immediate attraction and felt like it was going to be just very insta-lovey. I DNF'd it and actually asked for a refund. I know that there's some contention with that, but you know what? It was my money, so was not happy. The other one that I DNF'd was actually The Last House on Needless Street by Katrina Ward. This was another one that I had started listening to. I found it through my library and started listening to it. I made it about 40% of the way through and just realized I didn't care. This one, we're basically at a dead-end street in the wild of the Washington woods lives a family of 3, a teenage girl who isn't allowed outside, not after last time, a man who drinks alone in front of his TV, trying to ignore the gaps in his memory, and a house cat who loves napping and reading the Bible. An unspeakable secret binds them together, but when a neighbor moves next door, what is buried among the birch trees may come to haunt them all. Yeah, I got 40% of the way through. I did not like the perspective of the guy whatsoever. It very much felt creepy. I get that that's kind of the point, but it's not something I was particularly looking for. I didn't enjoy the perspective of the neighbor really because I don't know, I wasn't connected to any of them by the time I was 40% of the way through, and really it just became to the point of just like, you know what, I don't have time for this, I'm not interested, I'm not invested, so I DNF'd. So, which is really disappointing because I've heard other people rave about this book, so, but I just didn't like it. So my DNFs are not counted in my stats just because I don't consider them read. So yeah, there you go. So for the rest of October, so I will say too, those were both originally on my TBR for Spookoplathon. My roommate is a vampire, and it was for the spoopy prompt, which was to read like a cute and like no risk spooky book or theme, like spooky book for October. I was able to replace that one, and then the last house on Legal Street was because I landed on the black cat prompt, which was to read a book with a cat on the cover. So I don't have a replacement for that one, so that one didn't get filled. The first thing that I ended up reading for the month of October was The Wonderful Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum and read by Tavia Gilbert. Classic children's story where we are following Dorothy, who ends up getting caught in a tornado in her uncle and aunt's cabin in Kansas. The house takes her and her dog Toto to the land of Oz, where she accidentally ends up killing the Wicked Witch of the East, and to get home is instructed to find the Wonderful Wizard of Oz in the Emerald City, and along the way ends up meeting some very familiar friends, the Scarecrow, Tin Man, and Lion. So it was fine. I thought, I mean, it's very reminiscent of the movie. That's all I have reference to is the movie with Judy Garland. And yeah, I mean, there was a couple things of note in terms of the differences. I thought the movie carried it a lot further, faster, and there were some interesting elements to it. I thought there was interesting details in the book that wasn't represented in the movie. The fact that, you know, after, and this is I guess kind of spoilery, but these have both the movie and the book have been out for years and years, so if you haven't read them by now, then, or watched them, but when after the wizard leaves, that he puts the Scarecrow in charge of the Emerald City, and that ultimately the Tin Man ultimately has a place to go to if he wants to rule over a place, as well as the Cowardly Lion. That I thought was very interesting. Glinda is the Good Witch of the South, not the North. I thought that was interesting. I don't know, there was little bits and pieces that were interesting, but ultimately I found it relatively like boring, though it is a classic children, so I don't believe it was meant for me. So yeah, there was that. So that was, yeah, it was interesting. It was part of my 23 of 2023 reads. The next book that I ended up reading was 0 Days by Ruth Ware. This was my first Ruth Ware, and it was interesting to see Kayla from Books and Lala's review of it. I don't think she had very high praise for it. I think she rated it a 2. This is narrated by Imogen Church, and basically we are following Jack, who is like not a hacker, but she like tests security systems like physically. Like she goes into a building and breaks into a building and notes all their weaknesses, and she does this in partnership with her husband Gabe, who does more of the hacking of their systems and shows the weaknesses of that. But after a particular job, something goes awry, and Jack arrives home to find Gabe dead. And as she's grieving and trying to explain to the police what happened, she's realizing that she is the #1 suspect. And so she flees in order to stay out of prison and to figure out who was actually behind Gabe's killing. I thought this was interesting, though it is very meandery. I would have to agree with Kayla's assessment of this book in terms of it felt like the cursing and a lot of movement without the plot actually moving forward. That's why I personally felt like it was fairly meandery. I wasn't surprised with any of the twists and turns, and ultimately I would also have to agree that it didn't feel like we really learned anything about anyone. I couldn't tell you what Jack's personality was, or like who she was as a character. The same with Gabe. There were moments in there that I felt for Jack in terms of that situation, in terms of like her grieving for Gabe and like wanting him back. And it was just like, that hurt my heart in terms of like, yes, losing a partner like that would definitely suck. And I couldn't even imagine trying to figure out or solve his murder while also grieving. So there was those different aspects. I definitely like, I don't know. It was just, yeah, and there was like little bits of like, you know, like little red herrings or something of who you should and shouldn't trust, and it was very kind of obvious. So I don't know if that was the best Ruth Ware to start off with. I'm definitely interested in continuing with other Ruth Ware works. I think the It Girl was the other one I was kind of eyeing. So there's that. The Wonderful Wizards of Oz was did fit for the Spookopoly challenge of reading at TBR Vet, because it was one of the first books that I had put on my Goodreads TBR back in like 2012 when I joined it. So 0 days doesn't work for anything. The next book that I ended up reading was Gry Details by Erica Engelhaupt and narrated by Mari Weiss. This one I remember being cautious about going into just because someone had compared Erica Engelhaupt to Mary Roach, who I still need to do a review for, and so I was just a little nervous. And she's not the best, in my opinion, the best nonfiction writer, but she's always suggested, if you're looking for someone other than Kate Doughty to listen to in terms of some of the morbid topics of nonfiction, like death. So Gry Details goes by Erica Engelhaupt goes into some of so it's the adventures from the dark side of science, and science reporter Erica Engelhaupt investigates the gross, strange, and morbid absurdities of our bodies and our universe. From the research biologist who stung himself with every conceivable insect to the world's murderous mammals, this book explores often ignored but alluring facets of biology, anatomy, space exploration, nature, and more, featuring interviews with leading researchers in the field and a large dose of wit. And I think that's why ultimately Erica Engelhaupt is being compared to Mary Roach, though where Mary Roach feels very insertive and takes me out of her writing, I thought Erica did a decent job in kind of seamlessly putting in some of her wittier comments and opinions. I do feel that there were some elements I feel within this book, particularly when it had to do with menstruation, when it had to do with menstruation, that I thought, why is this in Gry Details? Though I appreciated the effort essentially of why it's like, in terms of like questioning why it's a taboo subject within our society, as well as just female sex organ in general, particularly doing with the clitoris. I thought that was very educational and interesting to hear that like until the 90s there was really nothing in medical textbooks in regards to a woman's sexual organ. So that's saying something. There were other elements too that I felt like unlock some new fears. I will forever just make sure that they're like be wearing goggles to make sure that the flies won't get anywhere near my eyes. So I thought it was very entertaining. I think I ended up giving it 5 stars. I can't quite remember. Hold on. 4 stars. I gave it 4 stars. It wasn't bad. It just wasn't one of my favorites. And then this actually worked for, and was on my TBR for the green prompt, which was to read a book with green on the cover for a Spookoplathon. The next book has been growing popular on BookTube, and I blame Jan from Jagged Agaton for putting it on my radar, because she read it, and that was Shady Hollow, a murder mystery by Juno Black. So this is a cozy murder mystery dealing with animals. So we are following the reporter Vera Vixen, who has a nose for news. So when she catches wind of a death that might be a murder, she resolves to get to the bottom of the case, no matter where it leads. As the fox stirs up still waters, she exposes more than one mystery and discovers that additional lives are in jeopardy. Vera's investigations unearth more about this town than anyone ever suspected. It seems someone in the Hollow will do anything to keep her from solving the murder, and soon it will take all of Vera's cunning and quickness to crack the case. Ultimately, it was relatively cute and cozy-ish. There were elements to it that I felt like, I don't know, also felt meandering in terms of like this was probably longer than it really needed to be without as much detail as I would have wanted. We do get we don't get much from Vera, but we get a lot from other folks, and I wish we could have gotten a bit more in terms of their stories. Like, there's a panda who has started a restaurant, and we learn more about him as the story goes on, which I thought was really cool. But I do hope to read the second one of this. So this intrigued me enough to want to know where the rest of the series goes. So I've heard from Jan Agaton that this one was one of her favorites as opposed to the other ones. So we'll see. It is a gorgeous little cover, and I got this as an interlibrary loan. Who did I get it from? Oh, the San Jose Public Library. So yeah, it was fun, and this one actually replaced My Roommate is a Vampire for the spoopy reading prompt for Spookoplathon. So next, I ended up finally reading The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. This one has been on my, this one could have competed for a TBR bet, in all honesty. I remember specifically wanting to get this copy, UK edition of this book when it originally came out and was fairly popular on BookTube. This one, we are following twins. I'm sorry, this is the first time I'm seeing their last. It's like seeing it visually. I just heard it. So like, this one was available through my library as an audiobook, so I listened to it. And for some reason that wasn't, I don't think that was the name. Anyway, we are following two identical sisters who end up running away from their small town after the age of 16. They're from a southern black community. So many years later, one sister lives with her black daughter in the same southern town. She once tried to escape across the country. The other secretly passes for white, and her white husband knows nothing about her past. Still, although separated by so many miles and just as many lies, the fate of the twins remain intertwined. What will happen when their own daughter's storylines intersect? I thought it was really interesting. I like the storytelling element of this a lot, but I kept expecting something worse to come of it. Like, I was super nervous at one point that the identical twin sister who is passing for white with her white husband in California was going to be exposed and something bad was going to happen, and nothing ever did. And then I was expecting something bad to happen to the identical sister who moved back to the southern Louisiana town for her daughter to experience something traumatic, and that never happened. So there was like this pent up anxiety that something terrible was going to happen, and it never did. And I don't know if that's like good or bad. I don't know. I was just kind of expecting something bigger with how everyone kept talking about it. I don't know. Maybe that's just my own presumption and the hype getting like letting my mind getting carried away or something. I don't know. It wasn't a bad book by any means. Like I said, I like the storytelling element of it. So, and I think I ended up replacing The Last Graduate with this book because it does have gold foil on it. It was for Mirror, which was for the Spookopoly readathon, and that was to read a book with a broken mirror or with a reflection. And in a way, this design is fairly mirrored and inverted, but it also has gold foiling that I was using with the Lost Graduate to count as reflective. I don't know, it was interesting. I think I also rated this a 3.5 just because, I don't know, it was fine. It was a fine read. The next book I ended up reading was Screaming on the Inside, Unsustainability of American Motherhood, and this one is by Jessica Gross, and it was narrated by Suaila El Attar. This one was a nonfiction. Let me pull it up. The title pretty much says it, but it's like, close your eyes and picture the perfect mother. She is usually blonde and thin. Her roots are never showing, and she installed that gleaming kitchen backsplash herself, watch her TikTok for DIY tips. She seamlessly melds work, wellness, and home, and during the depths of the pandemic, she also ran remote school and woke up at 5 a.m. to meditate. You may read this and think it's bananas. You have probably internalized just much of it. Journalist Jessica Gross sure had. After she failed to meet every one of her own expectations for her first pregnancy, she devoted her career to revealing how morally bankrupt so many of these ideas and pressures are. Now, in Screaming on the Inside, Gross weaves together her personal journey with scientific, historical, and contemporary reporting to be the voice for American parents she wishes she had a decade ago. The truth is that parenting cannot follow a recipe. There's no foolproof set of rules that will result in a perfectly adjusted child. Every parent has different values, and we will have different ideas about how to pass those values along to our children. What successful parenting has in common, regardless of the culture or community, is close observation of the kind of unique humans our children are. So I thought this one was really well done. In my bookkeeping of my books, I don't believe I rated it. On Goodreads, I put it as a 5 because there were reviews that were purposely making it 1 or 2 stars because they couldn't handle the criticism that Gross had on those Instagram moms, on those TikTok moms of the perfect white mother. They felt like she was critiquing, and she's like, what if, and all of them just sounded really, they couldn't handle the critique. They were feeling it as judgment. So on Goodreads, I have it as a 5 to kind of counteract that, because that's all it was a critique. I thought this was a really well done book. I hope to be a mother at some point, and it's one of those things that I happened to see this book on Libro and was interested in it for the sake of just my own education. So I listened to this and I felt like it was a really good history. What I really did enjoy about it too, though, is that Gross had diverse voices that she interviewed. She interviewed mothers of Asian descent. She interviewed mothers that identified as Black. She knew the statistics for Indigenous and Black mothers and mortality rates and the lack of health care that they can get. So, and she interviewed Latina mothers. So I really appreciated the depths that she went to. I also appreciated the detail she went into when it came to the history of America's mothers from the settler colonial perspective. How ultimately it has set up a really hard fight to continue to today to get American government and society to recognize just how much work parenting can be, particularly when something like COVID-19 happens. So I thought it was a really well written book. I do hope to get a physical copy of it at some point, because I do think it would be a good one to look back on and to remember when we do decide to have kids. So yeah, I really appreciated it. Next, I ended up reading The Sundown Motel by Simone St. James. This was a book of the month pick back in 2020. Happened to find it on through Libby, so was able to listen to it. Something hasn't been right at the roadside Sundown Motel for a very long time, and Carly Kirk is about to find out why in this chilling new novel. It's not so new anymore. Upstate New York, 1982. Viv Delaney wants to move to New York City, and to help pay for it, she takes a job as a night clerk at the Sundown Motel in Phil, New York. But something isn't right with the motel, something haunting and scary. Upstate New York, 2017. Carly Kirk has never been able to let go of the story of her Aunt Viv, who mysteriously disappeared from the Sundown before she was born. Carly decides to move to Phil and visit the motel, where she quickly learns that nothing has changed since 1982, and she soon finds herself ensnared in the same mystery that claimed her aunt. Ultimately, it was an interesting mystery overall. I enjoyed both perspectives of Carly and Viv. I think I enjoyed Carly's more at first, and then slowly realized that I enjoyed Viv's as well. What I'm realizing with Simone St. James's work, though, is that the paranormal elements that she tends to put into her work, though I've only read this one and the book of Cold Cases, I can't tell if I like them or not. So I did like the mystery element of this. I didn't think it was as creepy as it could have been, and I don't know. It felt like it could have been better, but I don't necessarily know how. So I think this was like a 3.5 star. It was fine. And so far, Simone St. James just tends to be in the middle of the road for me, and I can't tell about her writing. So, and then finally, the last book that I read for the month of October was All the Living and the Dead by Haley Campbell. This is blurred by Caitlin Doughty, as Campbell is a gorgeous writer. But this is from embalmers to executioners, an exploration of the people who have made death their life's work. We are surrounded by death. It is in our news, our nursery rhymes, our true crime podcast, yet from a young age, we are told that death is something to be feared. How are we supposed to know what we're so afraid of when we're never given the chance to look? Fueled by a childhood fascination with death, journalist Haley Campbell searches for answers in the people who make a living by working with the dead. Along the way, she encounters mass fatality investigators, embalmers, and former executioner who's responsible for ending 62 lives. She meets grave diggers who have already dug their own graves, visits a cryonics facility in Michigan, goes for a late night Chinese with a homicide detective, and questions a man whose job it is to make crime scenes disappear. This is another one I don't believe I rated, because we do have some of Haley Campbell's. I don't know if I did rate it or not. Oh, I rated it as a 4. I feel like I still shouldn't have rated it to, I don't know. I think that's why I rated it as a 4, is that ultimately it was really interesting, particularly, when it came to death. I was very much reminiscent. It very much reminded me of Caitlin Doughty's work, and she actually ends up referencing Caitlin at one point. A lot of it is kind of repetitive from Caitlin's work, as particularly she talks about embalmers and to folks who help with funerals and memorials, but there's also, and it also feels like an expansion of it too, because she does talk to more people in terms of crime scene investigators, cleanup crews, executioners. She even talks to midwives at one point, particularly midwives who, and I thought that particular part had me crying as I was making my Halloween costume, because she talks to a midwife who is in the business of helping the mothers who've lost their babies. So I would look up content warnings for here, not just because of the graphic depictions of death and injury, but also because of miscarriages. But I thought it was very important to talk about, and a very interesting point that she made. So I really did enjoy this. There was some elements of it that weren't quite there for me. But also what I appreciated about it was Haley Campbell talking about how parts of writing this book had influenced her as well. So I listened to this via the audiobook. I believe the audiobook was on sale. I also got this from Libby, so I lucked out really through my library. But this is also narrated by Haley Campbell, so we get her, right? I think it's narrated by Haley Campbell. At least the one on Libro was. I don't know if, I'm assuming the one on my library was too. But we get how this has affected Haley. So there was different parts when she was doing research for this book where she talks about how the impact that certain elements of this book had affected her, particularly when it came to the loss of life of children, particularly infants, how it affected her, how she became depressed. And I think that's also very valid, and I thought it was so great that she talked about it. So yeah, I really appreciated this book and highly recommend. So those were the books that I read in October. If you've read any of them, please let me know your thoughts down in the description or down in the comments down below. If you weren't interested, if it suddenly has sparked interest for you, please let me know as well. Otherwise, yeah. I hope that your October went well, that your Halloween, Samhain, and Dia de los Muertos went well, or All Saints Day. I hope that you are doing well, and hope that you are looking after yourself. So, yeah, I hope that you're enjoying your reading, and I hope that you are in the mental mindset to enjoy your reading, and I will see you in another video, hopefully very soon. Cheers.